Welcome, dear friend, to Dreamtime Science. Imagine yourself amidst shelves of ancient books, their spines worn soft under the gentle glow of a bedside lamp. The night outside stretches quietly, stars whispering old secrets through the window. Here, in this calm nook, we invite you to drift gently into stories wrapped in tranquility and wonder. If this moment feels right, a quiet tap of the like button or a soft word shared in the comments about where you listen from would mean the world. Let yourself settle now, adjust your pillow just so, breathe in slow, even rhythms. Together we will wander softly through the twilight realms of knowledge, letting curiosity soothe the mind while sleep tiptoes closer. Whenever you are ready, let your journey begin as we turn the page together. Tonight we drift softly into a world where Earth wears shimmering rings like Saturn's celestial embrace. Imagine the quiet dance of light and shadow, whispering secrets of how our skies and nights might change in this gentle, ringed dream. Let's glide very slowly, very gently, holding a safe, pillow-soft distance as we explore this sparkling possibility. If you find peace in these nocturnal discoveries, consider becoming a regular visitor to our quiet corner of science. Share in the comments what topic you'd love to dream about next. First, let's create the perfect space for learning. Cocoon yourself in comfort. Release any lingering tension and let your breath become soft and steady. Across the centuries, Saturn has hung in our sky like a riddle wrapped in splendor. To the naked eye, it gleams as a steady golden pearl among the restless, glittering stars, never twinkling, always faithful in its circuit. We now know this steadfastness is the mark of planets, not stars, but for most of human history, Saturn was a stranger, a bright wanderer, mysterious and slow, its secrets hidden by distance. Not until the age of telescopes did its most astonishing feature come to light. The broad, delicate bands arcing around its equator, the ethereal rings that turned an ordinary planet into a cosmic wonder. There is a peculiar ache of delight in the first glimpse of Saturn's rings, through a telescope or in a photograph, or even as an artist's rendering. It is a beauty so unexpected, so unlike anything else in the sky, that it takes a moment for the mind to believe. The planet is not merely adorned, but encircled, wrapped in a luminous sash more elegant than any crown. The rings are not solid, but they seem so, thin, flat, and impossibly wide, as if a giant hand had pressed a golden record around the planet's belly. Their symmetry, their calm perfection, strikes a chord deep in the human heart, as though the universe had composed a melody in light and ice and set it spinning above our heads. This allure has not gone unnoticed by artists and dreamers. Saturn's rings have drifted through our collective imagination, finding a home in science fiction and pop culture, their image a shorthand for the cosmic and the sublime. In the opening moments of Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey, the rings rise behind the spacecraft as a symbol of humankind's journey toward the unknown, their silent geometry a contrast to the chaos of earthly affairs. The rings have adorned the covers of pulp magazines, beckoned from the pages of children's books, and shimmered in the backgrounds of animated adventures. They invite us to dream, to believe that the universe is stranger and more beautiful than we had dared to imagine. Yet for those who peer more closely, the rings of Saturn are not just an ornament, but a puzzle. What are they made of? How did they come to be? No other planet in our solar system wears such broad, brilliant bands, though Uranus and Neptune and even Jupiter have their own faint and ghostly rings. Saturn's are the most resplendent, stretching out tens of thousands of kilometers, yet only a few tens of meters thick, a cosmic paradox, immense in breadth but razor-thin in profile. Through the spacecraft's lens, we see that these rings are not solid at all, but a swarm of ice and rock, from grains the size of sand to boulders as large as houses, orbiting in a complicated ballet. Each particle follows its own path, held in the grip of Saturn's gravity, colliding gently, forever circling, forever shimmering in the reflected sunlight. This mixture of grandeur and fragility, of order and chaos, has given Saturn's rings a special place in the human psyche. They are both real and unreal, tangible yet dreamlike, their very existence a reminder of the universe's capacity for surprise. It is no wonder, then, that science fiction writers and filmmakers have returned again and again to Saturn's rings, using them as a backdrop for adventure and mystery. In the grand theatres of imagination, Saturn's rings have been many things: a highway for alien ships, a hiding place for ancient civilizations, a source of rare and powerful minerals. In Arthur C. Clarke's Rendezvous with Rama, a cylindrical alien spacecraft passes near Saturn, the planet's rings a silent witness to its enigmatic visit. In the television series The Expanse, Saturn's rings serve as both a battleground and a border, their icy particles concealing the comings and goings of stealthy ships. Video games set in the far future let players soar through the rings, weaving between moonlets, dodging icy debris, feeling for a moment the thrill of proximity to something vast and elemental. Even outside the realm of science fiction, Saturn's rings have become a shorthand for cosmic beauty. Jewelry designers craft rings and pendants in their likeness, swirling bands of gold and silver around orbs of glass or stone. Architects borrow their curves for futuristic buildings. Graphic artists use their silhouette to evoke the fanciful, the futuristic, the otherworldly. To speak of Saturn's rings is to speak of elegance, of mystery, of the universe's infinite possibilities. And yet, as we marvel at Saturn from afar, a question arises, one that tugs at the boundary between science and fantasy. What would it be like if Earth, our own blue world, were ringed like Saturn? What would our skies look like, our nights and days, our cultures and myths, if a shining band of ice and stone circled above us, always present, always changing? It is a question that has haunted artists and astronomers alike. To imagine Earth with rings is to reimagine every landscape, every moment beneath the sky. The rings would not be a distant curiosity, glimpsed only through telescopes or spacecraft cameras, but a constant companion, shaping our world in ways both subtle and profound. Let us wander for a while into that parallel Earth. Let us picture the rings, broad and pale, arching from horizon to horizon, their icy particles glinting in the sun. Perhaps they would stretch above the equator, their symmetry slicing the sky, so that from some latitudes they would rise like a silver arch, while from others they would form a luminous ellipse, tilted and shifting with the seasons. At the equator they might pass directly overhead, a gleaming bridge between east and west. Nearer the poles they would hang lower, closer to the horizon, their colors deepening in the thickening atmosphere. By day the rings would scatter sunlight, casting pale shadows and shimmering halos on the land below. On clear mornings they would catch the dawn's first rays, igniting in rainbow flashes, painting the sky with subtle arcs of color. At noon they would blaze in reflected light, a ribbon of brilliance against the blue. Even on cloudy days their presence would be felt, a diffuse glow filtering through the overcast, an ever-present reminder that the heavens are not empty but adorned. By night the rings would be even more spectacular. Lit by the moon or by city lights, they would loop across the darkness, a silent river of light. In rural places, far from artificial glow, the rings would outshine all but the brightest stars, their icy fragments scattering starlight in 1,000 directions. The constellations would be bisected, the familiar patterns altered or obscured, and new myths would arise to explain the celestial band that divided the heavens. The rings would become a part of our stories, our art, our sense of place. Children would grow up tracing their arcs in the sky, lovers would meet beneath their glow, poets would find new metaphors in their shifting light. Whole cultures might orient themselves around the rings, their calendars tied to the subtle changes in brightness and color, their legends peopled with gods and spirits who dwelled among the circling stones. But the rings would not just change our view, they would change the earth itself. Their presence would alter the patterns of sunlight, casting moving shadows, shifting the balance of day and night. In some places, the rings might block the sun for minutes or hours at a time, creating cool bands across the land, influencing weather and climate, shaping the rhythms of life. The play of light and shadow would become a part of daily existence, as familiar as the rising and setting of the sun. For the people of this ringed earth, the question of the ring's origin would be just as tantalizing as it is for us with Saturn. Were they born from a shattered moon, torn apart by gravity's relentless tug? Are they the remnants of an ancient collision, a failed planet that never coalesced? Or are they a gift from the cosmos, a delicate accident, a sign that even destruction can give rise to beauty? Scientists would study the rings with a fervor, launching probes, building observatories, seeking to understand their composition and history. The rings would become a laboratory for physics and chemistry, a window into the processes that shape worlds. We would learn to read their patterns, to predict their movements, to unravel the story written in their shifting bands. Artists, too, would find endless inspiration in the rings. Painters would capture their subtle colors. Photographers would chase the perfect moment of light. Writers would fill pages with stories of love and loss beneath the circling stones. The rings would become a symbol of both unity and division, a reminder that the universe is both ordered and chaotic, both generous and indifferent. In popular culture, the rings would become ubiquitous. They would adorn flags and emblems, appear in advertisements and logos, shape the design of jewelry and clothing. The very image of the earth would change, no longer the lone blue marble, but a world encircled by brilliance, a planet with a crown. Travelers would seek out the best views, climbing mountains or journeying to remote places to see the rings in their full splendor. Pilots and astronauts would navigate by their shifting patterns. Sailors would use them for orientation. Dreamers would gaze up and wonder what it would be like to stand among the icy fragments, to look down upon the blue earth from the heart of the rings. The presence of the rings would also pose challenges. Satellites and spacecraft would have to navigate carefully, avoiding the dense bands of debris. Communications might be disrupted, signals scattered by the icy particles. The rings themselves would evolve over time, their structure shifting as particles collided and dispersed, their brightness waxing and waning with the seasons. Yet for all these changes, the rings would become a part of daily life, as familiar as the moon, as constant as the tides. They would shape our sense of time and place, our art and our science, our dreams and our fears. Standing on this imagined earth, beneath the arching splendor of the rings, one might feel both small and grand, small in the face of the cosmos' immensity, and grand to be a part of such beauty. The rings would remind us that the universe is not just a place of darkness and emptiness, but of light and wonder, of order and surprise. And as we drift beneath their glow, we might look outward to the real Saturn, to the other ringed worlds, to the distant stars, and wonder what other splendors the universe holds, hidden just beyond our sight, waiting to be discovered. But if we turn our gaze from the imagined to the real, the story of Saturn's rings becomes even more intricate. Their presence is not merely a visual delight, but a clue to deeper cosmic processes. What are these rings truly in the language of physics and chemistry? How did they form, and what do they reveal about the planet they encircle? The answer lies not just in their beauty, but in their substance, the ice and rock, the dust and shadow, the fragile balance that holds them in place. In the next turning of our journey, we will descend from the realm of dreams into the realm of matter, seeking to understand the true nature of Saturn's rings, particle by particle, band by band, in the cold, luminous light of science. Out beyond the hush of the night, where the sky swells with possibility and the stars are arranged in their ancient silent patterns, gravity draws its invisible threads through all things. It is the most patient of sculptors, the unseen hand that orchestrates the cosmic ballet. Tonight, as you sink into the gentle cradle of your bed, let us drift further into the intricacies of this force, this quiet conductor, and explore how, on a world girdled by its own shimmering rings, gravity would choreograph not only the heavens, but every grain of sand and every living heart below. Gravity, in its essence, is the mutual attraction between masses. It weaves together the sun and the planets, keeps the moon in its stately orbit around Earth, and holds your feet to the floor as the Earth spins beneath you. But when we imagine a world like our own, yet adorned with vast arching rings, the familiar rules of gravity are complicated by the presence of this spectacular adornment. The rings themselves, billions upon billions of icy and stony fragments, each obeying the dictates of gravity, transform the simple geometry of planet and moon into an intricate dance of forces. First, consider the rings, a broad, elegant band sweeping around the planet's equator, suspended not by magic, but by the precise and relentless pull of gravity. Each particle within the ring, whether the size of a mountain or a grain of dust, follows its own orbit, moving at a velocity that perfectly balances the tug of Earth's gravity against the centrifugal urge to fly outward into space. This balance is delicate, too slow, and a ring particle would spiral inward, raining down as a fiery meteor. Too fast, and it would break free, lost forever to the void. The placement of the rings is no accident. They occupy a realm dictated by a concept known as the Roche limit, named for the 19th century French astronomer Édouard Roche. The Roche limit is the critical distance from a planet within which the planet's tidal forces, arising because gravity pulls more strongly on the side of a moon or object closer to the planet than on the far side, become stronger than the self-gravity holding a satellite together. Within this boundary, any large moon or object is torn apart, shredded into a cloud of debris. This is how Saturn's rings were born, and how Earth's hypothetical rings would persist, as a perpetual memorial to the power of gravity, forever prevented from coalescing into a moon by the ceaseless pull and stretch of their parent planet. On a ringed Earth, the Roche limit would mark the inner edge of the ring, a sharp boundary beyond which no moon could survive intact. The outer edge, meanwhile, would be shaped by the competing influences of Earth's gravity and the gentle but persistent drag of the planet's upper atmosphere, which would gradually erode the innermost ring particles over eons, sending them burning through the skies as shooting stars. Beyond the rings, the moon would keep its stately course, perhaps slightly altered by the gravitational influence of the rings themselves, but largely undisturbed. But gravity's ballet does not end with the rings themselves. It reaches down, subtly yet inexorably, to the surface of the world beneath. The presence of massive rings would reshape the very experience of living on Earth. As the planet spun on its axis, the rings would remain fixed above the equator, drawing a luminous arch across the sky. From the latitudes near the equator, the rings would be a radiant, unbroken bridge, an ever-present canopy shimmering with the reflected sunlight. From higher latitudes, the rings would appear as an ethereal ellipse, thinning and eventually vanishing from view as one moved toward the poles. This grand spectacle would not be merely visual. The rings would cast broad, shifting shadows upon the world below. At certain times of year and at certain latitudes, the sun would pass behind the rings, dimming the daylight and painting the land with a subtle, diffused twilight. Shadows cast by the rings would move gently across the continents, lengthening and softening as the planet turned. Imagine standing on a high plateau at dawn, watching as the sunlight filters through 1 trillion icy crystals, scattering rainbows across the ground. The interplay of light and shadow would become a defining feature of daily life, a celestial clock marking the seasons in ways far more elaborate than our familiar solstices and equinoxes. Gravity, acting through the rings, would also sculpt the climate. The shadow of the rings would cool the equatorial regions beneath their arc, altering patterns of wind and weather. Rainfall might shift, deserts might bloom, and jungles might wither, all in response to the subtle redistribution of sunlight. The great atmospheric currents, the Hadley cells which transport heat from the equator to the poles, would find themselves bending around the persistent shade. Perhaps new climate zones would emerge, unknown to our own history, temperate belts beneath the rings, shielded from the harshest sun, and sun-drenched lands just beyond their shadow. The gravitational influence of the rings would tug ever so slightly at the oceans too. While their combined mass would be far less than that of the moon, the rings would still exert a gentle pull, raising miniature tides in both sea and land. Over millions of years, this could subtly stretch the planet's crust, perhaps even influencing patterns of volcanism and earthquake. The very shape of the continents, the rise and fall of mountain ranges, might be altered by the ceaseless embrace of the rings. Consider too the moon, our constant companion, whose own dance with Earth shapes the tides and stabilizes the planet's tilt. On a ringed Earth, the gravitational interplay between the planet, its rings, and its moon would form a complex, three-part harmony. The moon's orbit, perturbed by the mass of the rings, might drift or wobble in ways unfamiliar to us. Lunar eclipses would take on new forms as the shadow of the rings fell across the moon, sometimes dimming it to a sullen red, sometimes painting its face with spectral bands of light. Life itself, sensitive to the faintest rhythms of the cosmos, would adjust to these new patterns. Nocturnal creatures would evolve beneath a sky that was never truly dark, the rings glowing like a ghostly arch even on moonless nights. Plants might adapt to the cycles of ring shadow, their growth tuned to the waxing and waning of filtered sunlight. Migratory animals, guided by the sky, would chart their journeys by the shifting brilliance of the rings, using them as a compass more reliable than the stars. Human culture, too, would be shaped by these celestial mechanics. The mathematics of orbits and tides would be a daily concern, not merely the domain of astronomers, but woven into the fabric of agriculture, navigation, and ritual. Children would grow up tracing the arc of the rings in the sky, learning to read the subtle cues of shadow and light. Festivals and myths would blossom around the ever-present rings, their cycles marking the passage of time in a world endlessly attuned to the music of gravity. Yet for all their beauty, the rings would also serve as a reminder of impermanence. Gravity, though supremely patient, is never idle. The particles within the rings would collide and grind together, their orbits shifting over millennia. Some fragments would spiral inward, consumed by the planet's atmosphere. Others would be flung outward by the gentle but inexorable nudge of sunlight lost to space. The rings would wane and change, their forms slowly sculpted by the very force that created them. There is a strange comfort in this impermanence. The rings would stand as a testament to the balance of forces that holds the cosmos together, a balance that is always in motion, always evolving. The world beneath the rings, too, would change, continents drifting, climates shifting, life adapting to the endless interplay of sunlight and shadow. For every creature that flourished in the shade of the rings, another would rise to greet the unfiltered sun beyond their reach. At the heart of it all is gravity's tireless dance. It binds the planet to its rings, the rings to their orbits, and all living things to the surface below. It is a force that acts over every distance, from the tight embrace of a drop of dew to the slow, stately orbits of moons and planets. It is the architect of worlds, the weaver of patterns, the conductor of the silent music that shapes the universe. Pause now and let your thoughts drift outward, following the path of a single ring particle as it sweeps endlessly around the planet. Imagine the forces at play, the downward pull of Earth's gravity, the outward push of its own momentum, the gentle nudges from neighboring particles. Each completes its circuit in a matter of hours, moving faster than a jet plane, yet remaining forever tethered to the planet's embrace. The rings are not a static ornament, but a living, shifting system, dynamic, restless, ever in motion. As the night deepens and the world outside grows quiet, think of how gravity's ballet would shape not only the grand architecture of the heavens, but the intimate particulars of daily life. The angle of a sunbeam, the rhythm of the tides, the migration of birds, the stories whispered around evening fires, all would be touched by the unseen hand of gravity, translated through the shimmering language of the rings. And so the world beneath the rings would be a place of endless fascination, where every sunrise and sunset was painted anew by the interplay of light, shadow, and motion. The landscape itself would be marked by the passing of the rings, forests bending toward the diffuse light, rivers winding through bands of shade, cities rising beneath the arching sky. The rhythms of life would slow and quicken in response to the cosmic pulse as gravity continued its patient, unceasing work. Somewhere far above, another ring particle slips quietly from its orbit, drawn inexorably inward by the planet's gravity. It flares briefly in the upper atmosphere, a silent witness to the ongoing dance. The world turns, the rings shimmer, and gravity's ballet continues, subtle, eternal, both shaping and shaped by the world it binds together. In the hush that follows, let your mind rest for a moment in the tranquil certainty of gravity's embrace. There are still deeper mysteries waiting to be explored. the ways in which life and consciousness might evolve beneath such a sky, the marks left by the rings in the very stones and bones of the earth. But for now, let us remain in the gentle shadow of the rings, listening to the quiet music of the spheres and awaiting the next unfolding of this cosmic tale. From the silent vantage of an earthly night, Saturn's rings appear as a slender, unbroken band, drawn tight around the planet like the edge of a celestial coin. Yet the story of how we have come to understand the true nature of these rings is woven from centuries of careful watching, daring inference, and the relentless ingenuity of minds determined to see beyond the veil of distance and darkness. To unveil the shadows that shroud the rings of Saturn, humanity has marshaled an arsenal of tools, some as simple as polished glass, others as intricate as interplanetary spacecraft, and devised experiments as clever as any puzzle posed by the cosmos. In the earliest days, Saturn's rings were a source of confusion and wonder. Galileo Galilei, peering through his primitive telescope in 1610, saw not a ring, but peculiar ears or appendages flanking a central disk. The optics of his instrument and the limitations of human sight conspired to blur the truth. He wrote, in a letter to his patron, of Saturn's odd, triple-bodied nature, never suspecting that what he saw were the first hints of a disk of countless icy fragments, circling the planet in splendid formation. The true shape of the rings would elude astronomers for decades, each observer adding a brushstroke of insight, sometimes mistaken, sometimes prescient. It was Christian Huygens, with a telescope of his own design, who finally discerned the truth in 1655. Through a lens of polished crystal, he perceived the rings as a thin, flat structure encircling Saturn, separated from the globe by a gap of shadow. Huygens's deduction was a triumph, not only of optics, but of patience and methodical reasoning. He realized that the changing appearance of the rings across the seasons was a matter of geometry, the tilt of Saturn's axis causing the rings to alternately open wide and shrink to a line as seen from Earth. In this, the rings revealed themselves as a three-dimensional structure, their orientation and breadth shifting with the planet's slow march around the Sun. But to see is not always to understand. The nature of the rings, their composition, their origin, their fine structure, remained hidden behind the limits of resolution. For centuries, telescopes grew longer and lenses clearer, yet Saturn's rings remained a mystery. Astronomers strained to resolve their fine divisions and delicate gradations. In 1675, Giovanni Domenico Cassini, the Italian-French astronomer, detected a narrow gap splitting the ring system into two major parts, now known as the Cassini division. This dark rift, a gulf of relative emptiness, hinted at the dynamic processes at work in the rings and inspired generations to probe deeper. The tools of observation improved with time. Larger refractors and later powerful reflecting telescopes brought the rings into sharper relief. The 19th century saw the rise of spectroscopy, a new art of splitting starlight into its constituent colors. By examining the way Saturn's rings reflected sunlight, astronomers began to tease out their composition. The spectrum of the rings bore the telltale signature of water ice, a cool crystalline gleam that pointed to their frigid, distant nature. Here was a revelation. Saturn's rings, for all their grandeur, were not solid bands, but a multitude of particles, ranging from dust grains to house-sized boulders, each orbiting the planet in silent harmony. The dance of these particles, their order and chaos, became the subject of mathematical investigation. The Scottish physicist James Clerk Maxwell, in the 1850s, used the language of mathematics to show that Saturn's rings could not be solid, nor even liquid. Only a swarm of countless independent objects, obeying the laws of gravity and motion, could account for the stability and appearance of the rings. Maxwell's insight, born not from direct observation, but from pure reason, was later confirmed by ever sharper eyes and cleverer experiments. Yet there were limits to what could be seen from Earth's surface. The atmosphere, a trembling blanket of air, blurs the finest details, and Saturn itself is too distant for even the mightiest telescopes to resolve the smallest features of its rings. Astronomers devised indirect methods to probe the shadows. One such technique was stellar occultation, the careful observation of a distant star as it slipped behind the rings of Saturn. As the star's light passed through the rings, it flickered and dimmed, revealing the presence of gaps, clumps, and fine structure invisible to direct observation. By measuring the precise pattern of starlight dipping and rising, astronomers could map the rings in silhouette, tracing their hidden intricacies. The 20th century brought new eyes to the heavens. Spacecraft, freed from the distorting grip of Earth's atmosphere, could slip close to Saturn and gaze upon its rings in unprecedented detail. The Pioneer 11 probe in 1979 was the first emissary to fly by Saturn, sending back grainy but tantalizing images of the ring system. Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, those twin heralds of interplanetary exploration, followed soon after, their cameras and instruments revealing a world of astonishing complexity. With the Voyagers, the rings of Saturn bloomed before human eyes. What had once seemed smooth and featureless was revealed as a riot of structure, tens of thousands of narrow ringlets, some mere kilometers wide, braided and intertwined, punctuated by dark gaps and bright spokes. These spokes, transient ghostly streaks crossing the rings, were among the great surprises of the Voyager missions. They seemed to glide across the rings like shadows on a sundial, their origin mysterious. Later, it would be proposed that these features were clouds of fine dust, lifted above the ring plane by fleeting surges of Saturn's magnetic field, charged and then swept along by electromagnetic forces. In these observations, the rings proved themselves not only a matter of mechanics, but of electricity and magnetism, a cosmic tapestry woven from many threads. The Voyagers' instruments did more than merely look. They measured the temperature of the rings, finding them cold, only about 180 degrees Celsius, a realm where water freezes hard as stone. Their spectrometers mapped the subtle fingerprints of ice and trace impurities, confirming what earthbound astronomers had surmised. The spacecraft radioed signals through the rings to Earth, and as these signals passed through the icy debris, they were diminished and scattered. By analyzing these subtle changes, scientists could deduce the density and composition of the ring material, a remote experiment executed across billions of kilometers. Yet there was more to learn. In the early years of the 21st century, a new mission was dispatched. Cassini, named for the discoverer of Saturn's Great Ring Division, arrived in orbit around Saturn in 2004. For more than a decade, Cassini circled the planet, its instruments trained on the rings with an intimacy never before possible. It sent back images of dazzling clarity, revealing not only the broad architecture of the rings, but also their minute features, propeller-shaped disturbances caused by moonlets embedded within the ring, ripples and waves driven by the gravitational tugs of nearby moons, and ever-shifting patterns of brightness and shadow. Cassini carried a suite of instruments, each tuned to a different aspect of the ring's nature. Its cameras ranged from visible to infrared, mapping both the icy composition and the subtle variations in temperature. Its radar and radio science experiments probed the density and thickness of the rings, showing that while some regions are densely packed with particles, others are airy and tenuous, almost ghost-like. The ultraviolet spectrometer traced the signatures of water ice, organic molecules, and the faint traces of dust and meteoric debris that rained down upon the rings from the void beyond. One of the most ingenious experiments unfolded in Cassini's final orbits, the so-called grand finale. The spacecraft dove between Saturn and its innermost ring, slipping through a gap only a few thousand kilometers wide. Here, Cassini could measure the mass and gravitational pull of the rings with exquisite precision. By carefully timing its radio signals to Earth as it passed behind the rings and through Saturn's shadow, Cassini allowed scientists to weigh the rings, to gauge their total mass, and, by extension, to estimate their age and origin. The results suggested that the rings, for all their grandeur, are relatively lightweight, a thin, delicate structure, perhaps only a few 100 million years old. In the grand span of the solar system, Saturn's rings may be a fleeting phenomenon, a recent adornment soon to fade. Throughout these explorations, the interplay of shadow and light has been a recurring theme. The rings, seen edge-on from Earth, can seem to vanish entirely, the thin plane scattering so little sunlight that it is lost in the planet's glare. At other times, the rings open wide, their icy surfaces gleaming in reflected sunlight, casting long, intricate shadows upon the planet's cloud tops. Cassini watched as Saturn's seasons changed and the angle of sunlight shifted, transforming the appearance of the rings and the patterns of shadow they cast. In these shifting chiaroscuros, the story of the rings is written anew with every orbit. But the tools of discovery are not only mechanical. The human mind, ever restless, has devised theoretical experiments to probe what cannot be directly seen. Through computer simulations, scientists model the movement of ring particles under the influence of gravity, collisions, and Saturn's magnetic embrace. They watch as moonlets carve out propeller shapes, As spiral density waves propagate outward from the gravitational nudges of larger moons, as clumps form and disperse in a delicate balance of forces. These digital experiments, grounded in the laws of physics, allow us to see the rings as they might have been long ago and as they may become in eons hence. The study of Saturn's rings is also a study of time and change. Meteoroids from the outer solar system rain down upon the rings, churning their surfaces, darkening their icy faces with dust. The gravitational pulls of Saturn's moons, some embedded within the rings, others orbiting just beyond, shepherd and sculpt the ring edges, sweeping out gaps and piling up particles in narrow bands. Over spans of millions of years, the rings may erode and dissipate, their material falling inward to Saturn or escaping into space, leaving behind only faint traces of their former glory. Even as Cassini plunged to its fiery end in Saturn's atmosphere, it left behind more questions than answers. The fine details of the ring's origin remain uncertain. Did they form from the breakup of an icy moon torn apart by Saturn's gravity? Are they remnants of the primordial disk from which Saturn itself coalesced, preserved by some cosmic accident? Or are they perhaps ever renewing, fed by the gradual erosion of small moons and the capture of passing comets? Each possibility is a shadow on the wall, an echo of events that played out long before human eyes looked up east. N. Wonder. Across these centuries of inquiry, from Galileo's first glimpse to Cassini's last transmission, the study of Saturn's rings has been a story of patience, creativity, and the relentless pursuit of knowledge. Each tool, each experiment, whether a telescope turned skyward, a spacecraft crossing the void, or a simulation running in the circuits of a computer, has peeled back a layer of shadow, revealing new complexity and deeper mystery. And so the rings of Saturn continue their silent revolution, encircling the planet in a tapestry of light and shadow, ever-changing and eternally elusive. The experiments and observations, the theories and dreams have brought us closer, yet the true heart of the rings remains veiled, beckoning us to look again, to devise new tools, to listen for the faint music of particles in motion. As the night deepens and the stars wheel overhead, one might wonder what shadows remain to be unveiled, what secrets linger in the cold, silent spaces between the ringlets, waiting for another mind, another instrument, another moment of revelation. In the soft hush of the world's nighttime, beneath the patient turning of the heavens, Earth's sky unspools its ancient tapestry, and across this imagined world, a world where rings, luminous and immense, encircle our home, each night, and indeed every day, would remind us of our cosmic setting. As we contemplate these rings, not merely as physical objects, but as ever-present companions, we are invited to peer inward as much as outward. The rings become more than celestial bands. They become mirrors for the soul of humanity, reflecting our questions, our dreams, and the enduring ache of wonder. Consider for a moment the profound effect these rings would have on every civilization that ever gazed skyward. In our actual history, the night sky inspired stories, calendars, religions, and the very first inklings of science. The stars and planets, scattered and cold, were woven into constellations, heroes, monsters, gods, and myths. The moon's phases governed rituals and reckoning. But on a ringed earth, these luminous bands would dominate the heavens, a presence more constant and commanding than any constellation or passing comet. From the earliest days of language, people would have struggled to express the sight. Words would be bent and shaped, new expressions born, just to capture the grandeur of those arching bands. In the hush before dawn, or in the velvet blue of twilight, the rings would hover, sometimes bright, sometimes ghostly, always immense. They would be woven into lullabies and legends, their shifting colors and shadows marking time and season more vividly than any solitary moon. Dusk would bring not just the familiar fading of light, but the slow blooming of the ring's spectral glow, painting the world in shades unknown to our unringed histories. Religions would surely find in these rings a sign, a promise, or a warning. Across continents and centuries, the rings might be seen as the arms of gods embracing the world, or as celestial pathways to realms beyond sight. Temples could be built in alignment with the ring's seasonal tilts, their pillars echoing the geometry overhead. Pilgrimages might be timed to moments when the rings blaze brightest, or to places where their shadows draw sacred lines on the earth. The very idea of the heavens, a domain of order, mystery, and eternity, would be anchored not simply in the remote stars, but in the daily, undeniable presence of the rings. Philosophers, too, would be stirred. The rings would offer a paradox, at once close, visible to every eye, yet unreachable, vast and perilous. They would pose questions as old as thought itself. What is our place beneath these bands? Do they encircle us as a fortification or as a bond? Might they be a sign of cosmic favor or a challenge to transcend our earthly limitations? The rings, silent and slow, would become a canvas for speculation about fate, destiny, and the grand design of nature. Artists would find endless inspiration in the shifting play of sunlight and shadow, in the spectral colors refracted through ice and dust. A new palette would be born. The rings would be painted on cave walls and cathedral ceilings, cast in bronze, woven into tapestries, and sung in songs. Dancers might mimic the graceful arcs, poets might compare love or loss to the brilliant but untouchable bands. The rings would become a motif, a symbol of beauty and longing, threaded through every culture's art. For scientists, the presence of the rings would be both a challenge and a boon. The urge to understand their structure, their history, and their fate would shape the birth of astronomy itself. Observatories would be built not just to track planets, but to peer into the narrowest divisions of the rings, to measure their shadows and seek the secrets of their shimmering bands. The daily presence of such a grand phenomenon might have quickened the development of optics and mathematics, long before these disciplines emerged in our own timeline. The rings would be a kind of cosmic laboratory, their slow changes marking the centuries, inviting careful observation and patient reasoning. Yet beyond these practical and creative responses, the rings would become woven into the fabric of every culture's sense of the sublime. The sublime is not mere beauty, it is the feeling of being dwarfed by immensity, of standing on the edge of the known and gazing into something that cannot be fully grasped. It is terror mingled with awe, delight spiced with humility. On our ringed earth, the sublime would be a nightly visitor. Children would grow up beneath the bands, their imaginations shaped by the knowledge that the world is ringed round by something vast and mysterious, the sense of being part of something greater, of being enclosed within the arms of the cosmos, would be as natural as breathing. The rings would serve too as a constant reminder of time and change. The geometry of their shadows would shift with the seasons. As Earth's tilt carried the bands higher in the summer sky and lowered them toward the horizon in winter, in the equatorial regions, the rings might appear as a great arch overhead, while near the poles they would be a low, shimmering band. Ancient calendars would be built upon these changes. Harvests and festivals would follow the dance of light and shadow cast by the rings. The passage of time would be written not just in the stars, but in the shifting patterns of the rings' glow. In our own world, we have often felt isolated, a pale blue dot adrift in the dark. The rings, by contrast, would shape a different philosophy. Encircled, embraced, Earth would seem less like a lonely wanderer and more like the centerpiece of a cosmic stage. Some might see this as evidence of special favor, others as a prompt to humility, a reminder of the forces and processes that sculpt worlds far beyond our control. The rings would nurture both pride and perspective. Consider, too, the way the rings might knit together distant cultures. In our history, the night sky was a great unifier, binding together peoples who had never met, who spoke different tongues but traced the same constellations. The rings, even more so, would be a shared inheritance, visible from every land, an enduring presence above every village and city. Stories born beneath the rings would travel with traders, conquerors, and wanderers, their meanings shifting but their inspiration universal. The rings would be a common language, a symbol recognized by all, even as their interpretations diverged. Yet not all would be harmony. The rings could be a source of division as well as unity. Their north-south asymmetry, the way they appear bolder in some latitudes and fainter in others, might feed rivalries or myths of chosen peoples. The ability to see the rings in their full glory could become a matter of status or privilege, shaping where cities are built and how societies are organized. The rings would be both a gift and a challenge, a source of both connection and contention. In the realm of dreams and private reveries, the rings would have a subtler, more personal influence. Imagine lying awake at night, the window filled not with darkness, but with the pale, shifting glow of the rings. They would be a companion to solitude and a spur to imagination. Lovers might make vows beneath their glow. Children might trace their arcs in the air and imagine journeys along their length. The rings would be a source of comfort and of restlessness, a reminder that the world is larger and stranger than it seems. The spiritual impact of the rings would run deeper still. In every age, people have sought signs, indications that the universe is shaped by meaning, purpose, or design. The rings, so regular, so beautiful, would seem to answer that hunger. Some might see in them the promise of order, the assurance that the cosmos is governed by patterns and laws. Others might find in their shimmering complexity a reminder of chaos and contingency, the thin line between creation and destruction. The rings would not resolve these questions, but they would sharpen them, making the search for meaning more urgent and more poignant. Perhaps the greatest legacy of the rings would be the way they shape our sense of scale. To live beneath such grandeur is to be reminded always of the vastness of space and the brevity of life. The rings would be ancient when the first cities rose, unchanged as empires fell, enduring through ages of exploration and upheaval. Their presence would dwarf human concerns, but also inspire the hope that we might, in some small way, touch the eternal. The rings would invite each generation to gaze upward and wonder, to feel both small and significant in the face of the universe's grandeur. In time, as knowledge grew, the rings would become not just objects of awe, but subjects of understanding. The realization that they are not solid bands, but billions of fragments, each tracing its own orbit, would deepen the sense of mystery. The rings would become a metaphor for the world itself, unity born from multiplicity, order woven from chaos. Philosophers and poets alike would ponder this lesson, seeing in the rings a reflection of humanity, diverse, fragmented, yet capable of harmony. The rings would also serve as a reminder of fragility. Astronomers would one day learn that these bands are not eternal. They are the product of cosmic violence, perhaps the remnants of a shattered moon or the debris of ancient collisions. Slowly, imperceptibly, the rings would change. Dust would rain down on the planet, the bands would thin, their brilliance would fade. This knowledge would not diminish their beauty, rather it would lend a bittersweet edge, a sense that all things, even the most glorious, are fleeting. The rings would teach us to cherish the present, to find meaning in the moment, even as we dream of eternity. And so, under the pale light of the rings, people would gather to tell stories and to ask questions. The bands above would inspire not only answers, but wonder, the sense that the universe is more than facts and figures, that it is a place of mystery and possibility. The rings would remind us that knowledge does not banish the sublime, but deepens it, that the more we learn, the more we are compelled to marvel. As the centuries turn and the world changes, the rings would remain, a silent, glowing testament to the power of nature and the persistence of wonder. Their presence would shape the course of history, the structure of societies, and the contours of the human soul. Yet, for all their grandeur, the rings would not answer every question. They would remain, in the end, an invitation, a call to look upward, to dream, to seek meaning in the interplay of light and shadow. The rings would be not just a feature of the sky, but a part of ourselves, forever reflecting our longing to understand and to belong. And in the gentle hush between night and day, as the rings shimmer and fade with the coming dawn, humanity would find itself poised, ever looking upward, ever reaching outward, carried forward by the light of questions yet to be asked, and mysteries yet to be seen. As our journey drifts to a close, like a comet tail fading into the hush of space, we ponder the silent dance of Earth's imagined rings, casting gentle shadows upon our world. May this cosmic wonder lull your thoughts into peaceful reflection, and when you're ready to wander among more stardust mysteries, return to Dreamtime Science for another gentle voyage through the night.